Okay, hi everyone, I'm Maggie here with the bookstore. Thanks so much for coming and supporting Flyleaf Books, your local independent. Your attendance and book purchases from us help make us able to host events like this one, so thank you so much for shopping small and local. Tonight we have the pleasure of hearing from Sally Maslansky about her new memoir, A Brilliant Adaptation, with Lynn York. Sally Maslansky is a psychotherapist and author whose lived experience with dissociative identity disorder profoundly informs her clinical work and writing. Diagnosed in her mid-30s, she worked in therapy with Dr. Daniel Siegel, MD, treatment grounded in interpersonal neurobiology, attachment theory, and mindful awareness practices. Now a practicing therapist herself, Lynn brings a rare dual perspective to the field, bridging the personal and the professional. Sally lives and practices in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, where she continues her work in private practice and trauma advocacy. Lynn York is the publisher of Blair, a Durham-based nonprofit press whose mission is to seek out, nurture, and promote literary works by new and underrepresented writers. She is the author of 2 novels, The Piano Teacher and The Sweet Life. A graduate of Duke University and the University of Texas at Austin, she lives in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. We hope you enjoy the event. Thank you again, and remember to get a copy of A Brilliant Adaptation up front after the reading if you haven't done so already. Thank you.
Well, I'm really honored to be here tonight and to be the partner of Sally for a few minutes. I had the privilege of reading an early manuscript that Sally wrote. And when you're a publisher, sometimes when someone you know hands you a manuscript, you feel a little nervous. But as soon as I began reading this book, I was just bowled over. And I just knew that it was going to find a wonderful home. And it did at New Harbinger Books, and it did so very quickly. It's a Cinderella story. And I found this book deeply affecting. And I just thought that Sally's voice was so powerful. And it was also really clear. And I think she dealt with some dark and difficult things and managed to find some lyricism in the way that she wrote. And I also think that she was so clear in describing what happened that she's going to help so many people with this book. So I'm just thrilled, and I hope you'll indulge me. She got some great early praise, and I just want to read a few bits of that. You know, her colleagues, other therapists, called this book truly inspirational, and it said that her work serves as a masterclass for clinicians. And then another one said, Sally opens her heart and mind to share a deeply personal journey of self-discovery through the psychotherapeutic process. And then finally, another psychotherapist said, thank you for helping to bring to light an often dismissed and stigmatized experience for so many. And then just normal readers like you and me, and many of us here, also found this really compelling. Well, maybe Eric Roth, since he's an Academy Award-winning author, is not a normal person, but he called the book a triumph over all our shadows. Isn't that beautiful? Somebody else called it a page-turner, which it is, and a testament to our capacity for transformation. So I just want to let Sally say hello to you all and maybe give you a couple of short description of what her book is all about.
First of all, thank you all for coming. I was saying earlier, the last time I was in a room with everybody that was here to know me or to be there for me was when I got married. It's quite an experience. Thank you all for being here. Thank you. Yeah. And I just also want to thank you, Lynn. And Lynn was instrumental in my book. When I gave it to her, she was one of the first people that read it. And I ended it at the end of my therapy, and some people had suggested that they needed to know more about my life after therapy. And Lynn helped me structure that and actually gave me the idea for the ending, which I think works really well. So thank you, Lynn. Thank you. It was more than just a reader. Yes, thank you. So, yeah, do you want me to tell you a little bit about the book?
Yes.
Okay. So, so I was diagnosed with dissociative identity disorder in my 30s, and I've never really talked about it publicly until 2022. And it wasn't even so much that I was ashamed of it. It didn't just seem like something you could just bring up in conversation. But in 2020, as a therapist, I've alluded to it with clients. I think that I'd had a difficult childhood, but I didn't start talking about it really openly until I started to write the book, or I wrote the book. But in 2022, Dan Siegel, my former therapist and now my colleague and friend, was going to do a course on dissociative identity disorder. And I said, if you're going to do that, I think we should talk about the work we did together. And I offered it to him before, and he was very protective of me and wouldn't do it for a long time. But finally, he decided there'd been enough years between the time I'd been his patient and now I wasn't. So we did. And at the end of the course, the course aired twice, and then we had some live question and answers sessions. And I sort of felt like I had gypped the people that took the course, because I felt like I wasn't dishonest, but I really hadn't talked about what they wanted to know, which was, what was the experience of having dissociative identity disorder, and what was it that Dan Siegel did that was so healing? Because Dan, who, when I started working with him, was not the renowned psychotherapist that he is today. He was 34 years old, not just out of medical school, but just starting his practice. And he doesn't, in his writings and teachings, he doesn't tell you how to do therapy. It's not a form of therapy. He informs therapy. So everyone was just so curious, what is it that he did that was so healing? So that's what I set out to write in this book, to answer those two questions. And I think I have. Actually, it seems to be I'm getting a lot of feedback that I have. So I'm very happy with it. Yes.
Are you almost ready to read a little piece?
Do you want me to?
Yes,
Okay.
and I think, set the scene
Okay.
about where you were in your life, where you were
Okay.
in the country,
Okay.
etc.
So this is actually not the very beginning, but early in the book. It's my second session with Dan, who I call Dr. Siegel. Today I call him Dan, but back then I called him Dr. Siegel. And it's our second session. And the first session I had with him, some stuff got really stirred up. And I went to him because I was having some overwhelming feelings about fear and terror. And a lot of it had to do with that I had just adopted my son. And I was worried there was something wrong with him. And of course, there was nothing wrong with him. It was something within me. And this is our second session, which was a week later. I wanted to see him right away, but he was going to be out of town. So this is at the beginning of our second session. So I said, back in his waiting room when he returned, I was so happy to be there because I knew there was, can you guys hear me? Okay. Because I knew there was something missing that might explain my terror, and I felt ready to explore it with him. Sitting across from me again, he asked how I was feeling after our previous meeting. I feel good, Dr. Siegel. Paul and I, who's my husband, and I talked, and he finds my concern for Sam puzzling too. Sam's made so much progress. The joy he brings us as a toddler seems to contradict my fears. Paul reminded me to tell you about when the fear started. Oh, good. Would you like to tell me about that? So I described the day we landed in Bucharest in June of 1990 on our way to the town of Sibiu. This is the part of the book that always makes me tear up a little. Going to get Sam. Okay. Regroup. Okay. I described the day we landed in Bucharest in June of 1990 on our way to Sibiu, where we would meet Sam and be, oh my God, I'm so sorry. And begin to see Sam.
I told you it was powerful.
The adoption proceedings. I don't remember being happier in my life. Here we were on the way to adopt our son. It was an amazing trip. Paul and I were filled with joy. And then as soon as I got off the plane, I was hit with this intense sense of danger. I noticed it right away, but couldn't understand it. When you say you were hit with it, Sally, can you tell me more about how that felt? How it felt? I didn't so much feel it as be it. How did it feel? How did it feel? Why was it such a perplexing question for me? I just knew it, Dr. Siegel. I kind of felt frozen. I must have sat there for a few minutes, eyes closed, looking inside for the feelings. Who knew feelings would be so difficult to find, much less describe? It felt like something really bad was going to happen any minute. Could you feel it in your body? In my body, what does that mean? I don't think so. Was there any reason for you to be afraid? Well, we were in a country that 6 months earlier had had a bloody revolution, a country with a notoriously corrupt dictator and evil security force. Walking through customs, through the airport, checking into the hotel, and strolling through the city center, we noticed it was deafeningly quiet. People wouldn't look at you. It was strange. I was just scared. I didn't feel the fear, Dr. Siegel. I knew the fear. Sounds weird to say, but it was a fear coming from inside me, not from outside. It wasn't so much a feeling, more like a premonition, or maybe even a state of mind, that something bad was going to happen. I don't know. It sort of felt like something that followed me, always following me around. Did Paul feel it? No, not at all. And you know, I always feel safe with Paul. We spent much of 1989 in the Soviet Union where he was shooting a movie. Paul's a film producer and works all over the world. I never feel unsafe with him. But this time, being with him didn't help. It felt like the one in danger was me, not him, not us, just me. Kind of like I was in trouble. With whom? What? Who did it feel you were in trouble with? His question threw me a little. I so often would feel I was in trouble or about to be in trouble. And until this moment, it hadn't occurred to me to wonder why I felt that. I think I just always believed I was in trouble. It could be for anything. I never knew what it would be. It felt like that most of the time, my whole life. I don't know, just in trouble. I asked him what he thought it all meant, and he answered in the way that now, especially as a therapist myself, always makes me smile inside. I wound up asking him the same question often, and I always knew his answer. Well, what do you think? I simply couldn't make sense of it. This very first time he asked me that, I went blank. Not in a scary way, but as if I was searching for an answer that wasn't there. I don't know, Dr. Siegel. I'm feeling kind of blank, empty inside. I don't have a clue. You know, I often feel like I'm looking for answers that just aren't there. He looked at me in a way that I don't think anyone had ever looked at me before. His face was so friendly and kind, open to whatever was going on with me, no judgment. It felt like he was curious about whatever might be going on with me, even if it was nothing. I felt a tremendous sense of relief. I wasn't sure I'd ever felt that or had any sense of what I was relieved about. I'm wondering, Sally, about your fears for your son. And you've told me Paul is puzzled too, since Sam is fine. Sam is, in fact, flourishing. It has me thinking it might be worth exploring some things about your own childhood. I think it might help me to understand what's going on with you. How does that sound? Oh, that sounds fine. Okay. There was a pause. I wasn't sure what to say next, and nothing was coming to mind. Again, that blank feeling. I'm not sure what you want me to talk about. Oh, well, can you tell me about your childhood, as far back in your childhood as you can remember? Another long pause. He repeated his question. Can you tell me, Sally, what kind of childhood you had? I suddenly felt dizzy, closing my eyes, confused, lightheaded. I couldn't figure out why his question felt strange. Suddenly I had an awareness that something was changing. There was even a momentary feeling of terror. Why the terror? Well, opening my eyes, I had a good childhood. Oh, good. Yes. Can you tell me about it? The sensation's even stranger now. I'm not sure what you mean. Here he paused, the same look of understanding but mixed with some, not really confusion, curiosity. Well, you've told me you had a good childhood. Yes. Can you tell me something good about it? I wasn't sure how to answer because I didn't quite understand his question. I was having trouble taking it in, like something lost in translation. I was feeling a little kind of, how do I say it, out of body. I think he might have noticed. You know, Dr. Siegel, the thing is, I don't really remember my childhood. He shifted in his chair and looked at me with the kindest expression and said very gently, how do you know it was good then?
I think that's sort of, it shows you just sort of, this book is filled with some amazing moments and questions like this. And I found, this memoir is about Sally, but it's also about your relationship with Dr. Siegel. So, maybe people here don't know sort of who he was then and who he is now, because I think that's a central and interesting part of the book.
Well, when I met Dan originally in I started seeing him in 1990 when we brought our son home from Romania, and Sam was 16 months old when we brought him. And I had no idea what that meant to have a 16-month-old child who had spent all that time in an orphanage. So we took him to UCLA to be assessed, and it was Dan who was the director of the UCLA infant toddler unit. And there was something about him when he was so positive about Sam and the progress we'd already made in just the few months that we'd been together. And he talked about how there was most likely had to have been someone in the orphanage that really took to Sam, because Sam did so well with us. And also complimented my husband and I on what great parents we were, which, you know, of course felt great. And then when these feelings started hitting me, when I left that day meeting him, I thought if I ever need a therapist, I'm going to come to him. There was just something about him that just clicked. And about a year later, when these feelings that I'd been having already, obviously since we went to Romania, but they weren't getting better, they were getting worse. So I went to see him. And so he was 34 and I was 37. And he is today, a lot of you know who he is, I know, but today he's one of the most preeminent neuropsychiatrists in the world, and a very prolific writer, and just incredibly important in the world as a therapist. And I mean, it just was my wild luck to have met him when I did, because he truly changed my life. I mean, he really understood neuroscience at a time when, I mean, I remember him saying that he went to Harvard Medical School, and he said even at Harvard, he was, as a psychiatrist, he was never given a formal course on how the brain works or the mind. And his wife's a lawyer, and said, that's like me saying I went to law school and never had a course in the law. I mean, there he was really not thinking about the brain. It was really archaic in my mind. But Dan knew he was really at the cutting edge. And I mean, it saved my life. Yeah, it really did.
I think in the way that this book unfolds, you see a lot of the dialogue between the two of you, and it's very, very interesting. And obviously, from all the description of the book, you can see that what his diagnosis was. Yes. But I think one of the great things about this book is that you're shedding light on this diagnosis of DID, dissociative identity disorder. Right. So, without getting too technical, can you just maybe explain what this is? And because people have heard pieces of it and seen weird movies about it. So,
and all the movies are weird. None of the movies are accurate. So, okay, so the simplest way that I can describe it's really very simple, right? So what is dissociation? Well, we all dissociate, right? I mean, one of the things I like to talk about, I'll do my little thing real quick. Okay, so a lot of times when people ask me about dissociative identity disorder, I have to tell them how I came to develop it. So I have to say that I was abused sexually by my mother and my father. And there's almost always someone who does this when I say that. You know, they just can't take it in. A lot of people can't. It's a hard thing to take in. That's dissociation. That's your brain just going, whoa, I'm not bringing this in, right? But it's normal, healthy dissociation. We all have it, you know, I mean, we have it, and sometimes like even just driving somewhere, we have it. That's dissociation. But dissociative identity disorder is developed, one of the main ways they know for sure that it's developed is through something called disorganized attachment. And disorganized attachment means that it has to be from your parents, your caregivers, have to be the source of danger and terror. So the brain has two mechanisms around danger, and one is to go towards as a young child, one is to go towards my caregiver for safety, but the brainstem is saying, oh no, get away from the source of danger, and if the source of danger is the parent, neuroscientists call it a biological paradox, fear without solution. A child's mind cannot process it. So they talk about it fragmenting. And it's not fragmenting like in the multiple personality disorder model, which is where you have 18 zillion different personalities. It's the way the brain and the mind process information. And the information that you're processing, your sensations, your memories, your thoughts, your sense of self, get disassociated or divided, and then with time they form memory barriers. So you have one way of being the best example Dr. Siegel used to always say is, you know, to be a child who's been sexually abused by somebody in your house at night, and then you have to get up in the morning and have breakfast with that person and then go to school, you have to have ways to be able to be abused, sit at the breakfast table, and go to school and not know all those things exist together. And that's what dissociation is. And the real key to me, thing that most people don't think of it as, because they're all seen those movies, is that there's a big push within the dissociation world to not call it parts or alters, but to call it dissociated self states. And dissociated self states are verbs, not nouns. Okay? They are fluid. They are actions. They are not solid they're not nounified identities. So it's not like you have personality switches. You have different states of mind to react to different situations. And sometimes you can have a million different ways of reacting because you're a little kid and you're trying to figure out how to live. You only can develop this in the first 7 years of life. If you have an abusive situation after that, you're going to have other things that you have to deal with, but it won't be DID. But then as an adult, as you become an adolescent and an adult, it becomes extremely difficult to have dissociative identity disorder because you just don't know, you have no memory, you don't have a cohesive story, your conscious awareness is not, it's disorganized. It's just really difficult.
And you didn't know.
And I didn't. No one knows, really. And no one knows. And for me, when I was diagnosed, here's what I always knew. I always knew that I had no memory of childhood. But you can see, like in the section I just read, I had no memory, but I didn't think it was wrong. I just didn't remember my childhood. Someone had once told me if you didn't remember your childhood, it's because you were really smart. So I was just like going with that. but I didn't have, I was living a very stable life. I left home at 18. I went to college. I got a job. I worked. I moved to California. I met a man. I got married. I had a very stable life, became a mom. So it wasn't, and I think there's more people that have DID today that had my experience. That I've not yet met the person with DID who's had the experience of civil, or what's that one, split, where it's psychosis and homicidal and suicidal, and that's just not an accurate depiction of what DID is. There's a big, also another push within the dissociative world to have it changed in the DSM. The diagnostic book of diagnoses, to have it called, instead of dissociative identity disorder, to have it called dissociative identity response. And I think that change is going to happen in the next DSM, because it's not a disorder, it's a response to disordered behavior. It's a really protective, it's a good thing.
And maybe explain how that relates to the title of the book.
Oh, okay. So, and I didn't, my editor suggested the title. I didn't. I called it Fear Without Solution, which was not like really inviting. So when Dr. Siegel diagnosed me, of course, back then it was still called multiple personality disorder. And the only thing I knew about, or anybody knew about multiple personality disorder in 1991, was that movie Sybil with Sally Field. And I was like, that didn't resonate with me at all, right? So I just said, so I'm crazy. I mean, it was like, I can't have that. That means I'm crazy. And he said, no, Sally, it's the exact opposite of crazy. He said, in fact, I would say it's a brilliant adaptation. And that's where the title comes from.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So your work with him, you began to sort of slowly uncover what had been going on.
Yes.
And one of the things that you discovered were, and I want to give very much away, but were these states.
Yes.
Do you feel like reading that? There's this beautiful passage about the states that you found.
Not the dialogue,
let's see, it's on
the one on
84.
84, yeah.
Just
Okay, yeah. It's a
It's
wonderful.
a beautiful passage.
And you found it. I kind of had forgotten about it, and it's perfect. Okay. This isn't as long as the first one I read. Yeah. So therapy with Dr. Siegel was painful, exhilarating, and illuminating. This second year as his patient was about getting to know my states. I was grateful to have Dr. Siegel and the many tools he taught me, especially now with the bulletin board. It was a gathering place where all the states, I'm going to say all the dissociated self states, could meet to communicate with each other, me and Dr. Siegel. At first, it had been jolting to read things that I didn't recall writing and weren't in my handwriting. The states would express all kinds of things: emotions, therapy, internal frustrations, information they wanted to be brought to Dr. Siegel's attention. I got used to it, though, and began to find it so useful that I journaled daily to keep connecting with the many states that had been born out of my mind's ability to adapt to the abuse of my childhood. I came to know many of these states quite well. Some made themselves known to me more readily than others. Some emerged only painstakingly slowly. It was never easy, always emotionally painful, and often excruciatingly so. The suffering they reflected sometimes felt too much for me to know or bear, which of course is why they'd come into existence in the first place. Sometimes their suffering was more from perceived danger, and it would take time for me to discern the difference between real, present danger and what had come before, implicit memory. But eventually I would learn, when the states had come into existence, what their purpose had been and how they'd helped me survive, and how they at times worked together and other times worked at cross purposes. Some hated others, some were purely purpose-driven, others held emotions in their purest form. Some states had been born of both physical and emotional pain, some out of secrecy, some out of hope, some out of fear, and some out of just a primal drive to survive, to stay alive. There were dreamer states dreaming of a wonderful life ahead. Some states were scared, some scary, some couldn't speak yet, some only needed sleep. Over time, I came to recognize them and ultimately to be grateful to them all. Thank you for reminding me of that.
So it's so beautiful, and I just think it's so describes. It gives us this really amazing picture. One of the things that as a person who writes mostly fiction, I think writing memoir is really difficult because you're exposing the truth, and in particular in here you're exposing the truth that is difficult, and it's dark. And so I'm very interested in how you came to decide to do this, or if you did, how you began pouring it out on paper, and how you found that ability to be so honest and write it.
So thank you. So quite a few people have really complimented me, and it's so touching at my courage for writing this. And it wasn't courage that got me to write. I wasn't afraid to write this, right? This happened like, how many years ago? I was 37, I'm gonna be 72, so a long time ago. And it's fully integrated, and here's the brilliance of Dr. Siegel and integration. Once you're able to integrate, it doesn't have to be from dissociation, the story of your life, the facts of your life, good and bad, then you're able to tell it without it having those triggers from when those things happened, right? So it's a coherent story. And after I did the course with Dr. Siegel, while I'd never really talked about it publicly, the story just came out of me. I mean, it literally poured out of me in about 4 months. I just started writing to answer those two questions. And I knew that writing it, that I had to write the truth. I couldn't write, I wanted to say what it felt like to have DID and what he did that helped. I wanted to say what it felt like to have DID, what it felt like to heal. Not why or what happened, but the feeling of it. And the truth of it is I couldn't write this book if I couldn't say all the things that happened to me, right? But I've tried to write this book before, but I always, previously I was writing the story of my childhood and my family, and that just never went anywhere. And the secret was telling the story of my healing, and in the healing process, the unfolding of what happened to me. And I think that that's kind of how I remember it, right? Because that's how it came to me, was in the safety of Dr. Siegel's office, which was just this incredible sanctuary for me, really, for 10 years. And so I don't really think of it as courage. I think of, not that I don't think it was important. It was incredibly important for me to write, but I didn't feel vulnerable. I didn't feel, oh my God, I can't say this. I knew I had to say what had happened.
I think that is quite amazing. And also, I think most people here who know Sally know that, she has become a therapist for many years, serving many people in Chapel Hill. And so I wonder if the process that you went through with Dr. Siegel has influenced the way that you practice now.
Every way that I practice. And I talk about it in the book. When I wasn't a therapist when I started seeing him, it was the work I did with him that inspired me to become a therapist. And when I entered a master's program, and I kept waiting for all my teachers to teach me about the mind and about the brain, and then no one ever did. And he was getting a little bit known, especially in LA, which is where we lived still. But no one was teaching his work. No, they're not teaching it still at a lot of universities. I'm hoping my book might change that, or inspire more. But what I learned from him, I learned more about being a therapist from being his patient than I did in school. That's for sure, and in my training. The schooling was incredible, and the training was valuable. But the way I work today is based on that experience, and a lot of it has to do with just knowing myself and not getting triggered by my clients' work, and it's kind of, I'm at a loss for words. It just comes naturally to me. I don't feel like I get burnt out. I get tired sometimes. I need breaks, but I don't get burnt out as a therapist, and I just try to meet people where they're at, and not come in with today in therapy, there's so many different ways of doing therapy that are so precise and are very helpful. But the way that I think about therapy, it's from a much more organic place, and I try to meet my clients where they're at and teach them a lot about the way the brain works. Not that I'm a brain expert, but from a therapeutic stance, the way that things that we can all do to help us understand the way our mind works. Because, I just have to talk about neuroplasticity for a minute. Okay, so neuroplasticity is a superpower we all have. And it's so simple. The definition of it is, it truly is how experience impacts our brain. So we get to choose on a daily basis how we are going to shape our brain, right? And with repeated experience, it actually creates new neural networks. So if I wake up every morning just thinking life is horrible, life's going to be horrible. And this is a very simple example, but you have to really be careful. I teach this to all my clients. With your thoughts, even your most quiet thoughts, sometimes that aren't even within awareness, you want to be aware of when you're like beating yourself up or talking yourself down. And you have to change that. So you don't have to be like all happy that something bad's happening, but you have to find a more neutral way to deal with things so that you are not living in a world that's not good inside yourself, especially these days, I think. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. So now, would you like to read another passage, or do you want to take questions first and read if you have time at the end? What do you think?
Well, you guys want to have questions?
Do you have any questions?
I was wondering, when you wrote the book, did you ever go back, or did Dr. Siegel go back to his notes to see how they jive?
You know what happened? I'm trying to think. It's when I first moved back here, which was 18 years ago. So it was probably like about 15 years ago. One day I got a phone message, an email, and a text from Dan, which was highly unusual, right? And so I got in touch with him right away, and he said, I'm moving offices, and I don't have to keep your stuff anymore. He said, do you want it? Because if you don't want it, I'm going to shred it. And I thought for a minute, and I was his patient for 10 years. And I said, no, I don't want it. And so he shredded it. And I'm really glad I didn't have it. I threw away, I don't have any of my journals. I don't have any of the bulletin boards. I went through a phase where I was drawing like a mad woman. I didn't save any of those drawings. I just don't need them anymore. And I don't think I would have written the same book if I'd been doing it from notes. But when I finished the book, I finished it in February of 2023. Is that right? 23? Yeah, 2023. And the first person I knew there were 3 people I had to show the book to. before I could even consider going public with it. And the first one was Dan. And I sent it to him, and immediately he just said, he called it magnificent. And he said, you know, if I can help in any way, I will. And then I wanted to show it to my son. And my son read it, said the same thing. And then I showed it to my ex-husband, Paul, who was just thrilled with it. And they all three said, okay. So then I started the process. Yeah. Yeah. It rang true to all three of them.
I saw a question back there.
So, sorry. I have lived with a foster daughter with DID for a number of years. Her experience is deep and wide and vast and profound and very, very difficult. She's a young woman now, but she doesn't feel hopeful about her future at all. So I'm wondering what you would say to her. I couldn't get her to come today, but I'm wondering what you might say to her about her future and what steps she might take, I guess.
Well, of course, I can't give any therapeutic advice,
No,
right?
that's not what I mean.
But how old is she?
She's 23 now.
Okay. I would encourage her to find a really good therapist who works very specifically with DID. Does she have someone like that?
At the moment, she will attend.
Well, if you find you know how to reach me. I don't work with people with DID, but I know some people that are incredible therapists that would be really helpful for her. And I'm happy to give you those referrals. I would explain to her about her brain, right? And especially about implicit memory. So when Dan told me, like in our third session about implicit memory, because I was having, you know, these horrible feelings like someone was going to kill me. And he said, but I had no memory. And I said, how can I have this feeling and no memory? He said, you know, the brain encodes memory two ways. One is implicit and one is explicit. When I retrieve an explicit memory, it does come with a tag that says I'm remembering something. There's no question. But an implicit memory does not have that tag. An implicit memory comes in just a pure emotion or mental model or perception, but it doesn't come with the awareness that it's from the past. So the awareness of the feeling is completely, fully in conscious awareness, but that it's from the past is not. And once I learned that, that's what brought so much sense to me, because I could already know, even though, I mean, listen, it took me 10 years, but I started to know more quickly what was going on, which was there was no hope for me today, right? And he would say to me all the time, and it's in the book, so I can say it, you know, there was no hope when you were a little girl. There was none, but there's hope now. There's hope now. And if you could start to work with that implicit memory and make it more explicit, and then I mean, not just like overnight, but then it becomes your history. And that's why I was able to write the book, because it's not painful for me anymore. It's not hopeless. It's not painful. Yeah. Yeah.
Other questions?
Can I ask sort of a boring legal question?
Oh, yeah, please. I'm not a lawyer, but I'll do my best.
In my work life, I represent people who've been sued for defamation. So, of course, when I was reading your book, one aspect I was very interested in is how you sort of were able to clear the legal risk in publishing this.
Well, that way you would have to ask my publishers, because I didn't. I mean, I don't mention any of them by name. There's no way to connect me to my family.
Yeah.
I don't have the same last name that they have, and I didn't call any of them by name. So, and I don't defame anybody, and my parents are dead, and most of my siblings, not all my siblings are living. So I wasn't worried about it, because it is the truth, and I don't know how anybody could prove that it wasn't. So, or my truth anyway. Yeah, but it's a big question in our field. Yeah.
I'm wondering what it was like for you. I know you say that it's not painful anymore, but what was it like recounting all of these memories while writing this book? Like, what did it bring up for you? What was the process?
Nothing. It just was my story. It's my story, and I know it. It literally flowed out of me, because I remember it, but because it's been so processed and integrated, the pain is not there anymore. it's just gone. Because it just is gone.
So one of the things I think is so interesting about this book is that really it's sort of a tool or a guide for anybody who sort of has anything in their past that they'd rather not, that was in somehow way painful, a way to almost see it like you're looking down and you're reporting on it without sort of being it.
Yeah.
That's
kind of what I'm hoping for. I think it's not just for people with DID. I think the message that one of the many messages I'm hoping to convey is that you don't have to be a prisoner, to the constraints of your past, because, I mean, that's what I want to read, hold on. I want to read the definitions, which I have in the book, of, hold on. Okay. So, sorry. Okay, so dissociation is the process by which usually associated processes are disassociated or compartmentalized from one another. Okay? So an integration, dissociation is disintegration. And integration is the linkage of differentiated elements, the mind's process of linking differentiated parts into a functional whole. And that linkage is what's postulated to be the fundamental mechanism of health. So when you haven't had the opportunity to link together the pain of a childhood or an adulthood assault or trauma, it lives in your, especially we now know so much more about the body, it lives in your body. And now with the work of Ruth Lanius, we know that so much of the sensory stuff that happens to us lives in the lower part of the brain. So it's just stuck there. It's not making it up to the higher parts that can make sense of it. So once we're able to make sense of it, and making sense of it doesn't mean necessarily why did this happen to me, but how this has impacted me. So it's impacted me. It was horribly painful, but I don't have to live with the pain once I've integrated it. And I'll just say this too, this is the only kind of therapeutic advice I can give. One of the best ways, simplest ways, basic ways to promote integration in our brain is mindful awareness practices. Mindful awareness practices. That is what connects the brainstem, the middle part of the brain, and the prefrontal cortex here. It helps them. If this is the brain, this is the lower part. Here's the middle. Here's the human part. The more this brain can work from here instead of like this, the less you're going to feel the pain, because it's going to have been processed. Once, it's not meant to be a lifelong feeling. It's meant to be something that you can process and know as your history.
This is sort of the opposite of the model we see in sort of popular fiction and movies and everything else. It's the opposite.
Yes.
Because you're not stuck in something.
Yes.
For life.
You don't have to be. I mean, and it's not because you're not doing it right. It's the therapeutic world, I think, has a long way to go, but there are many great therapists in this area that can help people make sense of their story, so they don't have to live with the pain of the past. And you know the pain of the past. You can't deny it. You can't erase it. You can't pretend it didn't happen. You have to know it. You have to go towards it, and then it kind of lets you go. It loosens its hold on you. Yeah. But you have to really. It's not fun. The therapy was not fun. It was extreme. I mean, again, remember this. Well, this took 10 years of my life, but I had very serious work to do. So, it's the more you're able to harness neuroplasticity with your awareness and intention and internal reflection, and be able to sit with these difficult feelings, and little by little widen your window of tolerance for these difficult feelings and events. And the more you're able to go, oh, okay, yeah, that happened. And you can feel it. And you can remind yourself it's not happening now. This memory is an implicit memory, so I think it's happening now, but it's not. And the more you're able to sort of sit with it in a really serious way, it will let you go eventually. It really will. Yeah. It's not easy, it's not simple, but it's pretty basic. Yeah.
Early in the book, you talk about how the greatest predictor of a child's future well-being is the extent to which a parent has processed their own experiences. I don't know if that comes up later in the book. I've only read like the first third, but I'm interested if you want to say more about that, or if that does come up again later.
It does. It kind of does come up in the end. It's the most robust predictor of how a child will do emotionally in life is the degree to which that child's caregivers have made sense of their life story. And think about it. So I made sense of my life story. I'm not going to brag or anything, but my son's doing pretty well. And I mean, it doesn't mean his life's a picnic, but his emotional world is pretty solid. So I was able to overcome that because I made sense of it. And it's a lifelong process. I'm making sense of it, and you can ask him. I'm like working on it all the time, even as the parent of an adult. But it is, the way it's a very scientific way they came up with that, and it's through in attachment research. Yes, I can tell you more about it later. But it's if you look up, Dan Seal, it's in all his books. Yeah.
In the back.
Sally, do you have thoughts to share about how to be a parent, a friend, a partner to someone who's recovering and healing from their trauma?
Well, first of all, to believe them, right? I was very lucky in my life. My husband never ever doubted it, didn't support it. I mean, I think it drove him crazy sometimes, but he never ever, and I went to therapy all the time. He never once said, do you think you could cut it back and not go so much? I mean, he was really incredible. And I had a lot of help. I was very lucky. But to believe somebody, I've had many people tell me, not just clients, friends, tell me that something really awful happened, and that they just don't believe they'll ever. They might not ever be the same, but it doesn't have to be bad, not the same, right? It doesn't have to. Again, you don't have to live in the prison of your past, and to help keep hope alive, and by keeping hope alive within yourself, yeah, And if you have someone who has DID in your life, getting your own therapist to help you support that, it would be really smart. Yeah. Thank you.
Any other questions? I think we're probably a little bit out of time. There are many other passages that you're going to want to read in this book. So I'll say thank you so much for letting me be up here with you. It's a big honor, and I hope you all really get to read this amazing book. So, a debut. So, congratulations.
Thank you.